The hardest thing to do, regardless of what specifically it is, computer related or not, is to try to take on an entire project, especially a large one, by taking it all on at one time. That's why we so often break things down into steps or segments, or bite-sized chunks if you will. As the saying goes, anyone can eat an elephant if they eat it a bite at a time. The same goes for long documents. You may have actually used documents that utilize a feature called sections and never even have known it because unless you're looking for them, sections are basically invisible. But what sections can do for us in a document is not always invisible. We often can see these things, we just didn't really think about how they got there. Anytime we want to do something a little bit different within the same document, we want to use sections. Think of sections as breaking down the one file that we have into smaller documents. Each of these mini documents can have its own settings, including page size, orientation, margins, and even headers and footers. Adding section breaks is actually easy. We first decide where we want them based on a need to change things like headers and footers or orientation. For example, if we need to have a wide chart in an otherwise tall document, we might just want to rotate that one page, and that's where we would use a section. In our business plan, there are several places where we can use sections. But let's do an easy one first, near the beginning of the document. We know that normally in long documents, the front matter, for example, things like title pages, table of contents, and copyright information and such, usually does not contain page numbers. The first page that actually has content should be page number 1, but physically it's often not the first page in the document. That's why we need to use sections. So in order to accomplish that, let's go ahead and do that with the front matter in our business plan. My recommendation is that when we start to work with sections and kind of think about this overall layout of the document, that we actually take a look and take some time to clean it up as well. Now we're not going to worry about making this perfect, but we want to do a little bit of cleanup. So I'm going to go to the Home tab, and let's go ahead and turn on our non-printing characters. We've been kind of playing around with the cover pages, and we know that we have some extra space and some information we don't need. If we scroll all the way to the top of the document, we can see where the end of the cover page is that we inserted using the cover page feature. We want to get rid of all of the extra hard returns, page breaks, and everything else that we did in our own cover page that we created manually so that we can kind of clean this up. So I simply clicked at the bottom of the cover page, scroll down past all of these hard returns and page breaks that we may have. Then we finally get to the cover page that we created, and this is what we want to delete. So we'll find the end of that, which is after www.yougotit.info. Going to do a click while holding the Shift key to select everything in between, and then press the Delete key. What we basically want to do is go from the cover page that's on page 1 down to the table of contents, which should now be on page 2. If we see any leftover information like hard returns and page breaks, just continue to use backspace or delete or select and do whatever it is you need to do to get everything cleaned up. Now our table of contents is at the top of page 2, and this is where we want to insert our section break. The cover page and the table of contents should be the front matter. The executive summary is where we then want to begin our page numbering with a separate footer. So let's go ahead and place the cursor at the beginning of executive summary. We'll go to the Page Layout tab, and from here, in the Page Setup group, we see an option for breaks. Now it's true we can insert things like page breaks here, but remember we don't just want a page break because while that would force a new page, it would not allow us to do a separate header and footer on the first section versus the second section. So instead, we want to go down to the section called Section Breaks. And there are a variety of section breaks here. We're simply going to click Next Page. As you can see, our executive summary popped down and it now is on its own page, moving from page 2 to page 3. And that's exactly what we wanted. Now visually, when we turn off the non-printing characters, we're not going to see anything very exciting. But what we know is this will allow us to create different headers and footers, starting with executive summary. Let's do just a couple more for practice. Let's press Control-End to move to the end of the document. And here we know that we have a couple of sections that likewise should be on their own pages. Let's go ahead and click right before Building Floor Plan and insert a section break here. And then let's also put one for the bibliography. The reason we want to do this is because we might want to put different types of numbering for both of these sections. If we're going to number things, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the body of the document, Often these types of aftermatter use lowercase Roman numerals. By putting each one into its own section, we now can have the bibliography with its own page numbering and the floor plan with its own page numbering. I think you get the idea. It's simply a matter of deciding where you want things to be different and then working with it. Now, one of the other reasons that we wanted to put the floor plan in its own section is because we want to do something unique with that. The floor plan picture has not been completed yet because You Got It is still working with the architect, but eventually a picture of the floor plan will go here, but it's going to be a wide type of graphic. That doesn't really fit very well onto these portrait pages. So let's go ahead and reorient this particular section in order to accommodate the picture that we know will eventually be here. We can see that there is a next page section break after the building floor plan, and if we scroll up just a little bit, we can also see that there is a section break here. So this lets us know that this heading right now is in its own section, which is exactly what we want to see. Now we also have the coming soon, which is word art, and remember that that was kind of free floating, so it doesn't necessarily know where it belongs. We might want to scoot that up for just a few minutes while we do this particular orientation to make sure that it goes where we want it to go. The next part is simply a matter of clicking anywhere in the section. But let's go ahead and click in the title that says Building Floor Plan, and now I think you know the rest. You know how to change the orientation of a page. From the page layout, we can go to Orientation, and we could click Landscape. But let me caution you. When you use this, notice that there's nothing that says what to turn to landscape. So let's try a different method. Let's actually use the dialog box launcher for page setup. From here, let's go back to our orientation, which we can find on the Margins tab. Here we can choose landscape, and you might be saying, well, okay, sounds like what we were about to do, but a lot easier from the ribbon. Yes, except in this dialog box, if we look all the way at the bottom, this is where we get the opportunity to choose to apply this to this section only, this point forward, or the whole document. Everybody understands whole document. This section is, of course, just for our floor plan. This point forward, in our case, would include not only the floor plan, but also the bibliography. So this section is the best choice for us. With that selected, we can say OK, and now we can see that the page above is still portrait, our floor plan is now landscape, and our bibliography remains in portrait orientation. That's exactly what we wanted. Once you have sections in a document, you have to just slow down and think a little bit when you're doing things to change margins and orientation as to what you want to apply it to, and make sure that you do it appropriately. Sometimes after we've added things like section breaks, we want to get rid of them. In order to do so, you simply need to select the break itself. Now you can't see these things in all of the views, but we certainly can see them here. And if we wanted to select them, we simply need to move where we can go ahead and click and get it highlighted like this. If we try to click right on top of it, it doesn't really look like it's selected. So my best method is to do something like this, where we can actually see the highlight. Then we could simply press the delete key to remove it. But here's a little insight to reduce our stress as we begin working with sections as it relates to page features. Remember that in Word, the paragraph mark contains the paragraph information for the paragraph preceding it. And likewise, the section break contains the info for the section that precedes it. So if we had a portrait page, like the start of our document, followed by a landscape page in the next section, like our floor plan, and we then deleted the section break between them, we'd probably expect the pages to return to portrait. But they don't. They will all turn to landscape because we deleted the section break that held the portrait designation and left the last one that held the landscape info. That's a little tip I wanted to give you. While they're easy to create and just as easy to delete, remember to only use them when we need to alter the flow or structure of the document. Sometimes even very long documents don't require more than one section. If you're changing margins, size, orientation, remember to first place your cursor in the desired section and then use the dialog box. Don't just use the ribbon options. Only the dialog allows us to play the setting to that section or other things as we intend to, instead of the entire document or whatever may be defaulted at the time. Like real estate, working with sections is all about location, location, location. And sections are the answer to keeping documents as single files instead of trying to coordinate multiple files and collating them together just to change something simple about the setup or headers